Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, October 31st, 2024. 5 days until Election Day, Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, says the comments from Republican nominee Donald Trump that he would protect women whether the women like it or not is offensive to everyone. Donald Trump talks about immigration and border security at a rally in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a state that borders Mexico. Both presidential campaigns release ads with Halloween themes on this holiday. We'll also hear from historian Alan Lichtman about who will be the next president. His system has correctly predicted all but one presidential election result, going back to 1984. The Maryland U.S. Senate race has been closely watched as Republicans look to pick up seats and get a majority from the Democrats in the chamber. We'll talk about that race with Washington Post Maryland politics reporter Erin Cox. North Korea fires a ballistic missile with a range that could theoretically hit the continental United States. Secretary of State Antony Blinken reacts. And Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass celebrates the baseball Dodgers World Series win over the New York Yankees. We begin with the presidential campaign. Vice President Kamala Harris, Democratic nominee, holding rallies in Phoenix, Arizona, and Reno and Las Vegas, Nevada. In Las Vegas, joined by singer Jennifer Lopez. While former President Donald Trump, Republican nominee, had a rally in Albuquerque, New Mexico before going to Henderson, Nevada, that's near Las Vegas, followed by Phoenix, Arizona, where he'll be joined by former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. Before Kamala Harris left Madison, Wisconsin this morning, she spoke to reporters about what Donald Trump said at his campaign event Wednesday night in Green Bay, Wisconsin, about protecting women. We'll hear Donald Trump and then Kamala Harris.
And my people told me about 4 weeks ago, I was saying, no, I want to protect the people. I want to protect the women of our country. I want to protect the women. Sir, please don't say that. Why? They said, we think it's very inappropriate for you to say. I said, why? I'm president. I want to protect the women of our country. They said, sir, I just think it's inappropriate for you to say, pay these guys a lot of money. Can you believe it? I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to protect them from migrants coming in. I'm going to protect them from foreign countries that want to hit us with missiles and lots of other things.
Donald Trump Wednesday night in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Kamala Harris reacted today. She also mentions comments from House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, earlier this week concerning the future of the Affordable Care Act.
Today, we will be leaving Wisconsin, heading west, and I'll be obviously in 3 states again today, talking with the American people about the stakes of this election and the opportunity that we, the American people, have to chart a new way forward. I will comment on the former President Donald Trump's remark about women and whether they like it or not. And listen, it actually is, I think, very offensive to women in terms of not understanding their agency, their authority, their right, and their ability to make decisions about their own lives, including their own bodies. And this is just the latest on a series of reveals by the former president of how he thinks about women and their agency. Whether he has said, as he has, that women should be punished for their choices, whether he has talked about his pride in taking away a fundamental right from women, whether it be how he has actually created a situation in America where now 1 in 3 women lives in a Trump abortion ban state and has legal restrictions on the right she rightly should have to make decisions about her own body. The other point I will refer to about in the last many hours is the Speaker's comments about the Affordable Care Act. Look, I've been saying throughout this campaign, be very clear that among the stakes in this election are whether we continue with the Affordable Care Act or not. It has been a part of Donald Trump's agenda for a very long time. He has made dozens of attempts to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And now we have further validation of that agenda from his supporter, the Speaker of the House. And what that would mean for the American people is that insurance companies could go back to a time when they would deny you coverage for health insurance based on pre-existing conditions such as you being a survivor of breast cancer, asthma, diabetes. And what I know is that the American people, regardless of who they're voting for, know the importance of the Affordable Care Act, as it is also called Obamacare, in terms of expanding people's coverage to health care based on a fundamental principle that I hold deeply. Access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. So there's still a lot of work to do, but each day I think that there are also indications that we are receiving from my opponent that verify, validate, and reinforce the fact that, one, he is not going to be fighting for women's reproductive rights. He does not prioritize the freedom of women and the intelligence of women to make decisions about their own lives and bodies. And health care for all Americans is on the line in this election as well.
Vice President Kamala Harris, Democratic presidential nominee, speaking to reporters today in Madison, Wisconsin. Donald Trump posting on his Truth Social account, Lion Kamala is giving a news conference now saying that I want to end the Affordable Care Act. I never mentioned doing that, never even thought about such a thing. She also said, I want to end Social Security, likewise never mentioned it or thought of it. She is the one that wants to end Social Security, and she will do it by putting the millions of migrants coming into our country into it. Kamala is a liar. Everything that comes out of her mouth is a lie. It's made up fiction, and she's doing it because she's losing and losing big. The post from Donald Trump. And House Speaker Mike Johnson gave a statement to The Hill. Despite the dishonest characterizations from the Harris campaign, the audio and transcript make clear that I offered no such promise to end Obamacare, and in fact acknowledge that the policy is deeply ingrained in our healthcare system. Still, House Republicans will always seek to reduce the cost and improve the quality and availability of health care for all Americans. Anyone who has been a patient or known a loved one who has struggled with health issues understands why this is so important. That was a statement from House Speaker Mike Johnson to The Hill. Here is what Speaker Johnson said Tuesday night at an event supporting Republican House candidate Ryan McKenzie in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. The video and audio obtained by MSNBC.
We want to take a blowtorch to the regulatory state, okay? Yeah. I mean, these agencies have been weaponized against the people, and it's crushing the free market. It's like a boot on the neck of job creators and entrepreneurs and risk takers. And so healthcare is one of the sectors, but we need this across the board, and Trump's going to go big. I mean, he's only going to have one more term, right? Can't run for re-election. Right. And so he's going to be thinking about legacy, and we're going to fix these things. And,
no Obamacare?
No Obamacare. Yeah, the ACA is so deeply ingrained. We need massive reform to make this work, and we got a lot of ideas on how to do that.
House Speaker Mike Johnson earlier this week in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump today held a rally in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a state that he lost 4 years ago, and polls suggest he's likely to lose this year, but a state that has a very competitive U.S. House race, the 2nd Congressional District, and a state that borders Mexico. He spoke about immigration and border security.
People are being killed every single day by illegal migrants coming into this country. These are rough people. These are people that have been in jails and prisons, and again, 13,000 plus murderers have been released into our country, some with the death penalty already stipulated against them. The day I take the oath of office, the migrant invasion ends and the restoration of our country begins. And the savages charged with brutalizing and murdering Precious Jocelyn are members of the same vicious Venezuelan prison gang, Tren de Aragua, the most vicious gang, they say, in the world, although I would say MS-13 is right there with them. We took out thousands of MS-13 killers. When I was president, we took them out by the thousands. Before me, they didn't take them out because the countries wouldn't take them back. With me, I said to the countries, you're not going to take them back, right? You're not going to take them back? No more aid for that country. They said, sir, we'd love to take them back. We'd love to take them back. We took them out by the thousands.
Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee in Albuquerque, New Mexico today. Also during his speech, he continued to criticize Kamala Harris's qualifications to be president.
Yeah, I shouldn't say this about an opponent, but I have to. Because you know what? We can't take a chance on her. She's dumb as a rock. She's dumb as a rock. Did you see where her teleprompter went off last week? Two weeks ago, she's like, 32. And now the teleprompter freezes. Happens all the time. I have my good teleprompter guy back there. He's excellent, but every once in a while, no matter how good they are, this sucker breaks down. But I haven't been using it too much today, to be honest. Hey, isn't it nice? I always say, isn't it nice to have a president that doesn't need a teleprompter? Right? But her teleprompter broke down 3 weeks ago. And 32 days, she meant 32 days are left in the campaign. 32. Oh, 32. Did you see this? 32. 32. Oh, and I'm saying, oh, man, I was watching. I said, she's lost it.
Donald Trump rallied today in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The rally went about an hour and a half. You can always find all of C-SPAN's campaign coverage in its entirety at our video library at cspan.org. Associated Press reporting today, a new poll from the AP Nork Center for Public Affairs Research finds that about 7 in 10 Americans report feeling anxious or frustrated about the 2024 presidential campaign, and a similar share say they're interested. Only about a third say they feel excited. On this Halloween holiday, both major presidential campaigns have posted ads with Halloween themes. The Donald Trump ad is titled Kamala Harris, America's Nightmare, with the sounds of Kamala Harris's laughter.
New data shows inflation is the worst it's been since 1981, up 8.6%.
Crime on the rise in major cities.
We have a pandemic of lawlessness.
As regional sources are concerned that a larger attack from Iran could come in as little as 24 hours.
That ad from MAGA Inc., a super PAC, and the words on the screen at the end read, "End this nightmare, vote Trump." Kamala Harris's campaign also putting out a Halloween-inspired ad titled The Creature from the Orange Lagoon.
Never before has there been such a danger to America. A creature with orange leathery skin looms in the shadow, coming to destroy democracy.
You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
Raising prices for families.
100, 200, 2,000% tariff.
Spreading racist lies.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
Admiring dictators.
Able to deal with Putin and Kim Jong-un and all of the people the very fine people you have to deal with.
Don't believe us? Ask his own staff. Trump asked me to put him over my oath. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president. God help us. A total fascist. This creature vies for total unchecked power. Vote Harris Walls to stop him.
Ad from the Harris campaign posted today on this Halloween. Alan Lichtman, historian and American University professor who has correctly predicted the winner of 9 out of the last 10 U.S. presidential elections, says he thinks Kamala Harris will beat Donald Trump next week. A USA Today article explains Lichtman developed the metrics for his predictions with the help of seismologist and geophysicist Vladimir Borak in 1981. The system uses 13 historical factors or keys to determine presidential races. 4 of those factors are based on politics, 7 on performance, and 2 on the candidate's personality. Essentially, the metric is a true-false questionnaire from the incumbent party's perspective. If the incumbent party's answer to the question is true, a point is awarded. If the answer is false, the point goes to the challenger. If 6 or more of the keys are against the party in the White House, it's predicted to lose. Otherwise, Lichtman forecasts the party in power will win again. That was from USA Today. On Wednesday, Alan Lichtman explained why he thinks Kamala Harris will win in a virtual discussion hosted by the group The Common Good.
According to the keys, here are the keys that count against the White House party. Remember, 6 and you're out, fewer than 6 and you're in, at least predictively. So the White House party, Harris and the Democrats, lose my mandate key based on U.S. House elections. They lost U.S. House elections in 2022. Obviously, they lose the incumbency key. But, I was very critical of the Democrats for viciously trashing their sitting president right out in open. I've never seen that before, and I've studied our politics since the founding. I also thought they were headed for a disaster. Not only would they push Biden out and lose the incumbency key, but they were heading for a big party brawl and lose the contest key as well. And no White House party since 1900 has ever won re-election when they lost both those keys. But somehow, maybe they listened to me, I doubt it, the Democrats, for once, grew a spine and a brain and united behind Harris and avoided losing the contest key. So they're down two, a mandate and incumbency. A third key they're down is foreign/military failure. For the Middle East, it's a humanitarian catastrophe with no end in sight. Then there's a fourth key that they're down, the incumbent charisma key. This is not a subjective key, as people try to claim. They've been saying this for 40 plus years. It's a very tightly defined, very high threshold key. To win this key, you have to be one of those once in a generation, across the board, appealing, transformational candidates. There are very few of them. The iconic examples are Franklin Roosevelt, the Democrat, and Ronald Reagan, the Republican. Whatever you may think of Harris, she's only been a candidate for a little while. She hasn't reached the status of an FDR. So that's 4 keys down, 2 keys short.
So you're saying you don't, so then Donald Trump, even though his people think he's transformational, he's not charismatic to that degree.
He may be a showman. People may think of him in that way, but the key is tightly defined and he doesn't come close to being an across the board appealing candidate. He appeals to a narrow base, which is disqualified under the definition of the key. In 4 years as president, his approval rating on average in the Gallup poll was 41%, the narrow base. It put him right at the bottom historically of all presidents. In 2 consecutive elections, he lost the vote of the people by a combined 10 million votes. FDR and Reagan won 6 elections by landslide. So it's not what you might think of him. It's whether he fits the definition of the key, and he doesn't come close. That's why I didn't turn that key against the incumbent party, and that's why I only have 4 negative keys. I issued my prediction on September 5th deliberately before the Harris-Trump debate that the pundits were saying was so pivotal, but debates predict nothing, in fact, and that debate didn't predict anything. But I wanted to drive home my message that it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. So based on the keys, we are going to have predictively a path-breaking president, the first woman president, at least cracking, if not shattering, the glass ceiling, and the first president of mixed African and Asian descent, kind of foreshadowing where America is going. We're rapidly becoming a majority-minority country. Old white guys like me are on the way out.
Alan Lichtman, historian and American University professor, Wednesday during a virtual discussion held by the organization The Common Good. 2 members of Congress, Josh Gottheimer, Democrat of New Jersey, and Don Bacon, Republican of Nebraska, have been circulating a bipartisan unity commitment that, according to their press release, commits members to respecting the result of the 2024 presidential election, attending the inauguration, and serving as a voice for calm, regardless of who wins. It's been signed so far by 28 House Democrats and 6 House Republicans, that out of the 435 voting House members. Congressman Gottheimer and Bacon were interviewed today by Ramesh Ponnuru, Washington Post contributing columnist.
The Washington Post reported yesterday in a poll of 6 swing states, a majority of voters fear violence if Trump loses. 2/3 believe that the former president won't accept the results if he's defeated. Congressman Bacon, are these fears well-grounded?
Well, we saw violence in 2016 on the day of the inauguration. I saw a car burning. Obviously, we saw violence on January 6th of 2020. And I just think, well, Josh and I, by the way, I really appreciate Josh too. I mean, Josh and I work together on so many different issues, a lot of foreign policy and fighting anti-Semitism and things like this. He's been a great friend and a great partner in Congress. That's the reason we were doing this. We want to make clear that we're going to stand for what's right. And I can't control necessarily some of the statements that the president's made in the past. But we got to make clear that where we're going to be at. We're going to support the winner after all the courts can adjudicate whatever cases are brought forward. And we should be a healing voice within the House, and we should attend the inauguration regardless who wins. To answer your earlier question to Josh Ramish, was there should be more Republicans sign on there, but they thought initially that the primary focus was on January 6, 2020, and they didn't want to, they were fearful it was a one-sided letter. But I tried to assure them it's not, because we're hearing both sides talk this way about not respecting the results if the other guy wins. And when it comes to violence, we're seeing evidence on both sides that this can happen. And so we got to be Americans first before Republicans and Democrats, and make our case strong, but then we respect the winner. Shake hands after the election.
Speaking of violence, Congressman.
Sorry.
Sure, please. Well, I was going to ask.
Go ahead.
You go ahead. Add what you want to add.
Sorry if there's a delay, so I apologize. No, I'm just going to say to Don's point, the sanctity of our elections is critical, and there's nobody who wants to see us fail in the endeavor of an election than our enemies, right? Than Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, who are doing everything, as the Director of National Intelligence reported, I think last week, and I'm on the Intelligence Committee, but this was public, that our enemies do everything they can to undermine our elections, to spew anti-American rhetoric and online, and to get us to battle each other and question the outcome of an election. And what that does is when they seed these questions for people, right? It leads to, I know someone in New Jersey, a woman was physically and verbally assaulted. A poll worker was. A Texas man punched a poll worker, and an elderly poll worker. This are the kind of things that happen when our enemies get their way and try to sow discontent and questions. And we need to do to make sure, because they want our democracy to fail. They want freedom to fail. Our job is to stand strong. That's why Don and I are doing this, and so many others, to protect the whole process. And Susan Collins and I led the Electoral Reform Act, and to make sure last Congress to ensure that January 6th doesn't happen again, right? So all these things need to happen to protect our democracy.
Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Democrat from New Jersey, and Congressman Don Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, in a virtual interview today with Ramesh Ponnuru, Washington Post contributing columnist. D.C. reporter Andrew Layden posting on X, work crews have begun covering up the windows of buildings and stores near the White House as the election comes down to the final week. He includes photos and videos. You can find it at @Penguin6. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Join us for live election night coverage. No commercials, no pundits, no spin. Just the results in the presidential race and important statewide races, the candidates, and your voice, the voters. Help us keep this vital, unfiltered coverage accessible to everyone. Visit cspan.org/donate to make your tax-deductible contribution today. Thank you for supporting C-SPAN's unmatched election coverage. Donate today at cspan.org/donate.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Maryland has one of the closely watched U.S. Senate races that will decide the balance of power after next week's election. Democratic nominee Angela Alsobrooks, Prince George's County executive, is facing Larry Hogan, former Republican governor. Coming up in a minute, we'll talk with a Washington Post reporter about this contest. First, here are some of the TV ads running.
I'm Angela Alsobrooks, and I approve this message.
What do we get if Republicans control the Senate? Lindsey Graham, in charge of confirming Supreme Court justices. Ted Cruz, who dismisses climate change, leading the Science Committee. And Mitch McConnell pulling the strings. That's why they want to elect Larry Hogan. Because if he wins, they set the agenda. Passing a national abortion ban, blocking gun safety measures, raising the retirement age. With Larry Hogan, Republicans win, we lose.
As a Democrat for president, I know who I'm voting for. That's easy. But Senate, Alsobrooks, or Hogan? Look, they're both pro-choice, but Hogan cut taxes, tolls, and fees in Maryland. I like Hogan. He works with both parties. He finds common sense solutions. Alsobrooks would support her party 100% of the time, even their most extreme positions. This isn't complicated. I'm splitting my ticket. Harris and Hogan.
I'm Larry Hogan, and I approve this message.
Erin Cox, Washington Post Maryland politics reporter, has been tracking the Maryland U.S. Senate race between Democratic nominee Angela Alsobrooks and Republican nominee Larry Hogan. She joins us now by phone. Thanks for being with us. This was a Senate seat Republicans thought they might be able to flip from Democratic control. How are the chances looking?
Not so great as when they started. When Larry Hogan agreed to get into this race, Joe Biden was on the top at the ticket. And, to be a Republican that wins in Maryland, it means you have to get all of the Republicans, almost all the independents, and a good chunk of the Democrats. And that potion works best when Democratic turnout is depressed. And so there was a lot more enthusiasm about this race from the Republican side when Larry Hogan first got in. By now, several public polls have him trailing anywhere from 5 to 12 points.
You write at WashingtonPost.com, the race has become defined by whether Maryland's contest could tip the balance of power in the Senate next year. How has that played out?
That is a message that has resonated very strongly with Maryland's electorate. You have a lot of people who are well attuned to the D.C. market, who very much pay close attention to Democratic politics. And there's a candidacy that Angela Alsobrooks has built upon the idea that you can like Larry Hogan, you can like him as governor, but if you elect him, you will empower a GOP majority in the Senate. And that's a message that you can tell people who have voted for Larry Hogan twice as governor and kind of give them permission to not do it again.
What have been the main issues on each side each candidate has been pushing?
So Angela Alsobrooks, as we just talked about, has really pushed this idea that Larry Hogan is a Republican, which is kind of a funny campaign message when you think about it. But that's on some level all you really need to say. She's also talked about, his position on abortion and whether or not voters can trust him to keep his word now that he wants to restore Roe v. Wade to the law of the land. And so her primary message has been, if you care about democratic values, if you care about empowering President Kamala Harris, she needs a Democratic Senate to do it, and a vote for Larry Hogan will not give that to Kamala Harris. On the other side, Larry Hogan has presented himself as somebody who can rise above partisan politics, as somebody, if you don't like what's happening in Washington, you can vote for me and I will help disrupt the apple cart. I will be an independent voice. He continues to say that, he doesn't think that Maryland is going to be the seat that flips the Senate, but that'll be West Virginia and Montana. And so electing him gives Maryland a voice in the majority to advocate for Maryland voters. The other thing that he talks a lot about is crime. And Angela Alsobrooks was a state's attorney before she was a county executive. And he suggested the way that she's overseen crime in her jurisdiction suggests that she's not a great fit for the U.S. Senate.
We're talking with Erin Cox, reporter from the Washington Post. What has been the tone of this election? You point out in your article that Larry Hogan and Angela Alsobrooks have known each other and worked with each other for years.
Right. I mean, they grew up not far apart in the same eastern suburb of Washington, D.C. When he was governor, she was county executive, and they worked through the pandemic together. They built a cancer center together. They go out of their way to, say that they like each other. So it's been a very interesting, very Maryland campaign where everybody's very polite about their displeasure. And so you haven't seen a lot of attacks from either candidate on character, even on record. It's kind of been very muted. However, you have seen a lot of very negative attacks from the super PACs that are supporting each candidate, and they have poured more money into the Senate race than Maryland has ever seen before.
You have a series of video clips in your article with interviews you've done on various subjects from the candidates. What did you learn from them? Anything that we haven't heard before?
That they agree on a lot more than they disagree on. actually. It was one of the things that I learned. I also learned that Angela Alsobrooks has a lovely singing voice, and her go-to karaoke song is Ain't No Mountain High Enough. One of the things that struck me as I was listening to them is that they are talking to the same segment of voters, right? Like, they're not each trying to turn out a different base. They're both trying to appeal to kind of the centrist Maryland independent voters, because those are the folks that are really going to tip the race one way or the other.
And finally, has there been any influence from the presidential race on this U.S. Senate race?
Yeah, I think that the big influence of that race is the difference of energy and turnout that it's going to have in Maryland. Maryland is a deeply blue state. Registered Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1. Joe Biden won here by 33 points. Hillary Clinton won here by 30 points. The top of the ticket really dominates here. And what you're seeing is that Angela Alsobrooks isn't doing as well as Kamala Harris is doing in Maryland, but she's still doing quite well. And the more energetic Democratic turnout that you have in Maryland, the better that is for a Democratic candidate. And so, the top of the ticket has really shifted the energy and shifted the entire dynamic of the race, to be honest, because if you have a lot more Democrats turning out to vote for a Democrat, that just works better for the Democratic candidate.
Erin Cox, Washington Post Maryland politics reporter. You can find her articles at WashingtonPost.com and on X at Erin@the-Post. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
A story from the Sacramento Bee. Tonight we'll likely see the final debate in one of California's most consequential House of Representatives elections. Freshman Congressman John Duarte, Republican, and former Assemblyman Adam Gray, Democrat, will spar for the second time leading up to November 5th. The two last debated on October 25th. In Modesto, Duarte and Gray are in a rematch for California's 13th congressional district, a race that nonpartisan election analysts say is a toss-up. Their contest could help tilt House control toward Democrats or affirm Republicans' majority. Democrats need to flip just 4 seats nationwide to take the majority. Gray lost to Duarte, a farmer and businessman, by 0.4 of a percentage point in 2022, one of the nation's closest House races that year. That was from the Sacramento Bee. C-SPAN covered their October 25th debate. The first question was about both candidates claiming to be moderates. Adam Gray begins.
Had the opportunity to run for the legislature in 2012, representing Merced County and Stanislaus County, and used that time to go up and fight for a region that I thought was underrepresented, that too often was overlooked, and that too often neither party had necessarily served our interests or had the right answers all the time. And during my 10 years in the legislature, that was the focus and certainly the spirit of most of my work. I founded the California Problem Solvers Caucus, which was a bipartisan caucus made up of equal Democrat and Republican members doing work and trying to break ground on compromise and consensus. I was the leader of the moderate Democrats. I worked with both my Democrat and Republican colleagues not only to pass good bills, but oftentimes to stop bad legislation on the assembly floor and in assembly committees. My record is what I would encourage voters to look at. Anybody and everybody at election time can claim they're a moderate. And you often see in competitive seats like this one that are oftentimes referred to as purple districts, both candidates will say, oh, I'm in the middle, I'm a centrist, I'm working with the other side. But I would encourage you to dig a little deeper and look at our actual record. Over 10 years, you'll find that my record has been consistent, that I have actually delivered working with Republicans, that I've been endorsed by other Republican elected officials throughout this district, like Sheriff Jeff Dirksen here in Stanislaus County and Sheriff Vern Warnke in Merced County. The record is what matters, not the rhetoric.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Now, Congressman Duarte. And reminder, no applause, please. Thank you.
Easy out there. Yeah. So I'm first time in politics. I run for Congress in a seat that Joe Biden just won by 11 points. Is it about being a partisan? No. It's about looking at our communities here in the Central Valley and understanding what kind of strains are in our communities, what kind of duress Mendota's going under, how they've never had a federal program. Now they've got $5 million for roads. It's understanding how the farmers, for all the rhetoric about water bonds and everything else, don't have water. And we know that that's affecting our valley communities so much. And in the divisions in Congress back in D.C., you're all worried about Heritage Action Project 2025. Well, I'm proud to tell you, Heritage Action considers John Duarte the lowest ranked Republican by every one of their standards. In the House of Congress, I have a voting record. It's only 2 years because I've been out there in the real world, running a business, creating jobs, raising a family. But when Heritage Action looked at it all, I didn't even know they had a rating until I looked at it. And I am the lowest ranked Republican in Congress. I do stand against the extremes of both parties. I want everyone to be who they are and love who they love. I want women to have choice. I want women to have freedoms. I want everyone to have freedoms and choice. But you know what I really want? I want the American dream alive. And I will bring that American dream back to life in this valley, working with local electeds. You want to talk about moderate? There's a Central Valley Leadership Roundtable. It's all the electeds down in the South Central Valley. It's got all the Democrats, the independents. They made an endorsement in this race. I am the first Republican the Central Valley Leadership Roundtable has ever endorsed. I'll stand against my party when that's what makes sense. I'll stand with my party when that makes sense, to get gas and groceries cheaper and to get life back on track here in the Central Valley for working families. Thank you.
Congressman John Duarte, Republican from California, debating his Democratic challenger for re-election, former state assemblyman Adam Gray. At debate on October 25th, California's 13th congressional district took place in Modesto, California, hosted by the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. This race is rated a toss-up by the nonpartisan Cook Political Report with Amy Walter. Wall Street today, the Dow down 378 points, NASDAQ down 512, S&P down 108. CBS News writes the Personal Consumption Expenditures, PCE, price index, the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation measure, dropped to 2.1% last month on an annual basis, close to the central bank's goal of a 2% annual rate. That could cement more rate cuts ahead of 2024, according to Wall Street economists. That was from CBS News. Also, the October jobs report, final jobs report before the election, comes out on Friday. Story from USA Today, North Korea test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile that flew for its longest ever recorded flight time and with a theoretical range capable of striking the U.S. mainland. South Korea and Japan's militaries reported Thursday. It marked North Korea's first ICBM launch since December and comes as the reclusive nuclear-armed country may be seeking to grab U.S. attention ahead of the November 5th presidential election. There was an article from USA Today. Secretary of State Antony Blinken talked about this during a joint news conference at the State Department in Washington with the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and their South Korean counterparts.
One of the things that we emphasized today was a reaffirmation of the United States' ironclad commitment to the ROK security, and that includes through extended deterrence. That's especially important in light of the ongoing provocations coming from North Korea, including another ICBM launch just yesterday. We condemn it in the strongest terms. The latest launch of many and other provocative actions that it's taken. Flagrant violations all of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. All countries should be demanding that the DPRK cease these destabilizing actions. We are closely consulting with our partners and also with Japan. In fact, Foreign Minister Cho and I were on the phone early this morning with our Japanese counterpart, and we will be focusing, as always, on this in the days to come, including the actions we'll take in response.
State Department news conference with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Story from Reuters. The United States has received information that indicates that, quote, right now, there are 8,000 North Korean troops in Russia's Kursk region. Deputy U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Robert Wood told the Security Council on Thursday. Wood said, I have a very respectful question for my Russian colleague. Does Russia still maintain there are no DPRK troops in Russia? That's referring to North Korea's formal name, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Article goes on, the Russian representative in the 15-member Security Council at the time did not respond to Wood. Moscow has neither denied nor directly confirmed the presence of North Korean troops. After an initial denial, North Korea has since defended the idea of deploying troops as being in line with international law. That's all the reporting from Reuters. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at that joint news conference at the State Department spoke about North Korean troops that could be used in Russia's war against Ukraine.
As you know, we now assess that North Korea has sent around 10,000 of its soldiers to train in eastern Russia. And as Secretary of State pointed out earlier, our most recent information indicates that about 8,000 of those DPRK soldiers are now in the Kursk Oblast. Now, we've not yet seen these soldiers deploy into combat against Ukraine's forces, but we expect that these North Korean soldiers will join the fight against Ukraine in the coming days. Our assessment is that Putin's forces have trained these North Korean soldiers in artillery operations, UAV operations, and basic infantry operations, including trench clearing. The Kremlin has also provided these DPRK troops with Russian uniforms and equipment. And all of that strongly indicates that Russia intends to use these foreign forces in frontline operations in its war of choice against Ukraine. Make no mistake, if these North Korean troops engage in combat or combat support operations against Ukraine, they would make themselves legitimate military targets. So we are consulting closely with our allies and partners in other countries in the region on these reckless developments and on our response.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at a State Department news conference. Returning to the Secretary of State Antony Blinken, also at this news conference, he was asked about the Middle East and the reports that a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon may be announced soon. Two senior U.S. officials, Amos Hochstein and Brett McGurk, today met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
On Lebanon, let me just say that we are working very hard and making progress on reaching understandings of what would be required for the effective implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701. This would be the basis of a diplomatic resolution to the crisis. It's important to make sure that we have clarity, both from Lebanon and from Israel, about what would be required under 1701 to get its effective implementation. The withdrawal of Hezbollah forces from the border, the deployment of the Lebanese armed forces, the authorities under which they'd be acting, an appropriate enforcement mechanism. And I can tell you that based on my recent trip to the region, the work that's ongoing right now, we have made good progress on those understandings. We still have more work to do, but that's what's necessary to get us to a diplomatic resolution, including through a ceasefire.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the State Department, part of a joint news conference with the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and their South Korean counterparts. Story from Axios: Israeli intelligence suggests Iran is preparing to attack Israel from Iraqi territory in the coming days, possibly before the U.S. presidential election. Two Israeli sources tell Axios. Israel and Iran have been engaged in an escalating tit-for-tat for weeks, carrying the attack out through pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and not directly from the Iranian territory could be an attempt by Iran to avoid another Israeli attack against strategic targets in Iran. The sources said Israeli intelligence suggests the attack is expected to be carried out from Iraq using a large number of drones and ballistic missiles. That was from Axios. Today is Diwali. A Voice of America article reads, the festival symbolizes the victory of light over darkness and is celebrated by Hindus, Jains, and Sikhs around the world, especially in India. President Biden held a celebration at the White House on Monday. One of the speakers was Dr. Vivek Murthy, U.S. Surgeon General, who spoke about his parents emigrating from India.
As we celebrate Diwali, the triumph of light over darkness, let us remember that choosing this light starts with each of us. I know that darkness can sometimes feel overwhelming. I know that. I have felt that myself. But during my years as Surgeon General, I have also seen people creating the light that we need. Families who don't have much left after a storm, but still bring food to their neighbors. Students who notice lonely classmates and decide to reach out. Parents who are stretched thin, but pitch in to take care of each other's kids. People who encounter anger and anxiety on their commute, but choose to be kind because you never know what someone else is going through. When we make these choices together, we create the kind of world that we want for ourselves and for our children. That is the message of Diwali. Choose light, always. Whatever the future may bring, whatever the future may bring, it is our light and our fierce commitment to one another that will see us through to a better day.
Dr. Vivek Murthy, U.S. Surgeon General at the White House Diwali celebration on Monday. Today is the holiday. The tradition of a White House celebration of Diwali began with President George W. Bush. And finally, on Washington today, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass congratulating the hometown Dodgers Major League Baseball team for winning the World Series last night over the New York Yankees. At a news conference today, she mentioned a wager she had with New York City Mayor Eric Adams.
I don't know how you are feeling, but I am feeling like victory. Victory. This is a wonderful day, and I know that the Dodgers plane just landed, and they were greeted with a salute from the fire department, and we can't wait to see them back here. Let me just say that as soon as this press conference is over, I will be shipping a Dodger jersey to my colleague in New York, Mayor Adams, because he has lost the bet. And he will be wearing a Dodger jersey in City Hall in New York. So on behalf of the entire city, I want to express our pride and heartfelt congratulations to the Dodgers, to the players, and to their families, the coaches, the trainers, the front office, and everyone who had a hand in making history last night. Every night, each of you exemplified the very best of our city and put greatness on display.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass at a news conference in her city today. The victory parade through the city streets scheduled for Friday. Thank you for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.